You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 19th of September 2025 on Monocle Radio. The Briefing, in association with Addis. Hello and welcome to The Briefing, broadcasting to you live from Studio One here at Midori House in London. I'm Tom Edwards. Coming up on today's programme...
The bond between our countries is like no other anywhere in the world.
Donald Trump's historic second state visit to the UK concludes, but how successful was it? Monocle's foreign editor Lex Elf will tell us his view. The 23rd London Design Festival has been going on all week, and Nick Manise, Monocle's design editor, will be here to give us his highlights. And we dive into a new book taking Japan by storm, a collection of poems constructed entirely out of adverts for condominiums.
Enjoy the city. Embrace the greenery.
All that ahead here on The Briefing with me, Tom Edwards. A very warm welcome to this Friday edition of The Briefing. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's good afternoon to Lex Self, who joins me here in the cosy confines of Studio One. Hi, Lex.
Hi, Tom. I was going to do a Fernando Augusto Pacheco impression.
That was amazing, wasn't it?
Hello, Tom.
Enjoy the greenery. Listen, Donald Trump has departed the UK, his second state visit, unprecedented. Let's be honest, Lex, it's something to the relief of probably everyone involved that it seems to have been pulled off without a major hitch. When we spoke earlier in the week, you were looking ahead and saying, let's hope we're not having to deal with any major gaffes. Somewhat, almost remarkably, that came to pass. I don't know, give me a couple of highlights, lowlights. Did anything surprise you from this week? Because there weren't any major snafus, perhaps there's nothing that jumped out, but what did you make of it?
Well, you said it was unprecedented, but I think it was actually quite highly precedented.
Yes, very nice.
And in the sense that the British authorities and whoever is responsible for coordinating these events had ensured that not a hitch went off. Every move made by the King Charles, the sovereign of the UK, and the president was carefully managed. There was the pomp and pageantry of Windsor Castle, a full military, quite impressive actually, and that was the bit I enjoyed the most. Perhaps I'm in the wrong business. I quite liked.
I have suggested that to you before, Lex, to be honest.
I think I'd quite like to be in the King's cavalry, not least to wear one of those
military man,
yeah,
big old bearskin hat.
I very much. There were. I don't know what quite they are, the hussars or something, and they were doing some brilliant dagger kind of choreography.
Listeners, Lex is acting this out unhelpfully in the studio here. It's primarily an audio medium, Lex. Give our listeners a hand here with this.
Very gold braid on a red kind of hussar's short collar jacket, and as they passed the two heads of state, they would do this kind of elbow thrust. This elbow thrust down with a ceremonial dagger. That was probably my highlight.
It was. I know you'd said that you were looking forward to the pageantry, gilded carriage wheels. You were very excited about for some reason. On a very slightly more serious basis, obviously a big deal was inked about US direct investment, particularly on the tech scene. Lots of rhetoric about job creation and cementing this old alliance. I guess the devil will be in the detail of that. On a marginally more serious basis, Lex, I mean, did we learn anything about the delicate balance of power between the two? For me, it looked very much like classic head-patting condescension from Trump, and Starmer playing the game and understanding that, you know, for right or wrong, this is somebody he needs to keep on side for ongoing geopolitical efficacy. And he was happy not to be being questioned about his domestic travails. But I don't know, did we learn anything of substance about the nature of the, quote, special relationship, or indeed how other world leaders might best or better deal with Trump going forward?
I think the balance of power is heavily imbalanced between the UK and the US. Look, Keir Starmer has decided that the best approach to Trump is pure flattery and to cleave as closely as possible to the US, for the UK to cleave as closely as possible to the US. history would suggest that won't necessarily be to the UK's complete advantage. There was a very telling moment when I believe it was either Chris Mason, the BBC political editor, or the BBC's North America editor, Sarah Smith, asked Susie Wiles, who's Donald Trump's chief of staff, whether or not after those 2 days Britain would be able to influence the United States more, and she just said no.
Don't stand on ceremony.
She said Donald Trump will only ever do what's best for America, or act purely in America's interest. So I think Trump said during the joint press conference in the Great Hall of Chequers, which is the Prime Minister's country retreat, which is where day two's events took place, that the UK and the US have done more good on this planet than any two nations in human history, and that the two countries will always be friends. Now, I don't know how we can fact check that particular statement, but there is an idea that Trump is fond of the UK, and the flattery and the pomp of the royal reception will have played well with him. And as you said, there was this big tech deal, lots of money, and I think NVIDIA investing in a huge AI data center in the northeast of England, which is a very deprived part of the country, which needs all the jobs it can get. However, there's another way of looking at that, which is that the UK has even more closely bound itself to Silicon Valley and the US tech giants, who actually just drawing money and resource and intellectual property out of the UK and just taking it back to California. And actually, how advantageous is that for the UK to be so dependent on these companies that don't seem to have much of an interest in spreading wealth around, for example?
I think that's an understatement. Just on the kind of geopolitics, Lex, obviously certain journalists, watchers, other protagonists did try to introduce some of the thornier issues currently dominating the global agenda and discourse into the conversation. They wanted to ask Trump about Epstein, which I think understandably got somewhat short shrift. What about on Palestine? Yeah, people were asking about the Gaza conflict, about genocide, about Trump's willingness to listen to Starmer on that, and he was pretty clear, firm even, that they disagreed quite strongly. Is there any way that these kinds of events, even when, as you said, Starmer and the sort of combined might of the British establishment was spending all of its endeavours just trying to sort of cosset Trump whilst he was here, do you think they would have got any of their priorities, requests, their feeling that there's an urgency here that Trump's not willing to engage with on that issue, or do we just have to file that one away as not relevant in these discussions?
I don't know. I mean, looking at them in the press conference yesterday, you just see two completely, Starmer's living in the past almost, in the sense that whenever he's asked a question, he does that classic politician thing of first of all stating, if he's asked a question on Gaza, he first of all has to start it with the prerequisite that Hamas is a terrorist organization. We're not in favor of them having any say. And then he goes on to answer the question. You ask Trump a question, I mean, who knows what's going to come out? He does not stand on ceremony. He starts talking about whatever he wants to talk about, and often meanders and brings in four other different subjects, and then back to Starmer, who does the stiff politician circa 2010 act. Whether the telling point over Gaza, and obviously the big story regarding Gaza and Israel in the UK at the moment, is that it looks like the UK is going to formally recognise Palestine as a state tomorrow. Now, there were questions about whether that being tomorrow after Trump had left was very deliberate. The UN General Assembly is early next week. There are a few European countries that have said they will formally recognise Palestine there, the UK and France being two of them. So when Starmer began to answer that question and started talking about Hamas as a terrorist organisation, Trump very kind of ostentatiously grabbed him and gave him a pat on the back and sort of smirked, and then did his look around the room, sort of gurn. And he said that was the only thing that they really disagreed on, the two of them. But as you said, there were no major gaffes. Trump seemed to enjoy himself. These pictures of, and which the British are very pleased with, saying a lot of the time that we're the only country in the world that can offer this kind of historic pomp and ceremony, and that was beamed around the world, and I think that is actually quite good for British soft power. But as to actually anything concrete other than this tech deal, there wasn't much substance there.
Lex, always good to have your insights. Thanks for tracking that visit during the week. That's Alexis Self, Monocle's Foreign Affairs editor. Right, let's catch up with what else is happening. Our Laura Kramer is following the day's other news headlines.
Thanks, Tom. Israel has shut down the only crossing between the West Bank and Jordan after a deadly shooting. A driver bringing Gaza aid from the kingdom opened fire at the Allenby Bridge, killing 2 Israeli soldiers. No group has yet claimed responsibility for the attack. Iran has condemned a European plan to impose new sanctions if it blocks UN nuclear inspectors. French President Emmanuel Macron says major European nations will likely bring back sanctions by the end of the month. France, Germany, and the UK started a 30-day process last month to restore penalties after talks on Iran's nuclear program stalled. And Russia is building a $5 billion satellite internet network to rival Starlink. The space agency Roscosmos says it has tested several satellites and improved the design for full production. The project aims to challenge Elon Musk's SpaceX, whose Starlink service has helped Ukraine stay connected during the war. Those are the day's headlines. Back to you, Tom.
Thank you very much indeed, Laura. We will have more news coming your way at the top of the next hour. Right now, though, we're keeping things close to home, for me at least, here in London town. The 23rd edition of the London Design Festival has been underway all this week, championing the city as a global design capital. Here once again to tell us more about what the highlights have been, we welcome back Monocle's design editor, Nick Manise.
Hello, Tom Edwards.
Hi, Nick. Now, we have been chatting to you and some of your colleagues all week who've been crisscrossing the city. There's been lots happening.
There has been lots happening.
What stood out?
Mostly time spent in bars and cocktails.
What?
Celebrate. This is a week that's about the design community coming together. I feel like it starts out very civil early on. There's a lot of talk about what are the best installations, what are the new products, and then I think energy starts to wane. So drinking starts to pick
your
up pace.
Energy or the collective energy of the community?
My energy and the collective of the community. But it's funny how the week evolves across the city, which I think is quite fascinating. So earlier in the week, you tend to be kind of in East London. So the city for London Design Festival breaks up into, and I'm using air quotes, I appreciate we're on radio, but breaks up into design districts. So the Shoreditch Design Triangle tends to be the place to be on Monday and Tuesday, which is where I was on Monday and Tuesday. And you kind of bounce between showrooms there, kind of seeing new work that's on show. I was at Vitra in their amazing tram shed space, looking at their new releases. You can kind of start to bounce around that whole area. SCP and another amazing British firm celebrating 40 years. It's a retailer, and also I guess it has its own signature collection where it works with designers. So kind of looking at what they're doing, they had this amazing little pop-up shop inside their actual shop, kind of selling little kitschy kind of knickknacks, which people can still go and visit. I mean, right up your alley. You're a kitschy knick-knacky kind of man, aren't you?
Let's move on now.
Okay, yeah, probably the right thing.
No,
it
sounds good. You know me so well. Can I ask you one thing, Nick? Because it was funny. I was chatting to Grace Charlton, your colleague, our colleague, earlier this week, and she said one of the interesting things about London is there's no question about the creative ambition, and indeed the creative. It's an incredible machine of great design production here. But she was saying that, to her mind, as one of these kind of global design capitals, it maybe lacks some cohesion, partly perhaps because it is so vast.
Spread out. Yeah,
but this
certainly.
week, do you think that London as a centre is getting better at drawing all of those disparate elements into one cohesive whole, as we see more in Milan or when we see it in Copenhagen, for example, or is there still work to be done?
No, I think it's still work to be done. I think we're certainly missing a trick here, which is maybe a little bit disappointing. I mean, I think I was talking about Shoreditch there. Then last night I've bounced out to Brompton in West London, and you kind of see all the high-end, amazing luxury furniture brands, mostly from Italy. But I think maybe what London is missing and is kind of like that marquee kind of showcase that is all about adventure and exploration and pushing boundaries. We are lucky in London to have Material Matters, which is where this kind of initiative started. It's now a touring showcase, and that's taking place this week in Space House, and that's maybe the one thing that we've got, but it's kind of isolated in that there's not much else around it, and you kind of wonder if this could maybe expand out a little bit. I think there's certainly an element here in London of kind of the big name brands, whereas I think actually the strength of a design event is that sense of the unexpected and adventure and discovery, and I think maybe we're resting on our laurels a little bit too much, because I think it's that thing. It's like, yeah, you can kind of go into any of these household name showrooms anytime you want, but how often are you going to kind of discover new works by emerging designers like Joe Armitage right in front of your face? And I think that's maybe what we're missing.
Nick, just briefly, the adventure continues. Where are you headed next? Mark our card for design watchers around the world. What's happening in the days, weeks, months ahead that you're most excited about?
I think London for me is kind of like the wrap on the, I guess, September Design Weeks, but there is so much still coming up. I mean, in October, there's Design Week South Africa, which is across Joburg and Cape Town. Dutch Design Week is always amazing in Eindhoven. We've got Cape Town I've already mentioned, but Dubai Design Week as well. So you kind of have this amazing little run through October into early November. And for me, it's capped off by the Modernist Weekend in Faro in Portugal. And that's where you're going to find me catching that last little bit of sun I can.
I was going to say, suspiciously, are you just chasing early autumn sun?
This is exactly what I'm doing. So I'll be getting out. I'll be in Dubai for a little bit of heat.
I'm going to check, dear listeners, that these events are taking place where Nick claims they are, in order to gauge.
Well, feel free. Maybe we can spend some time on the sun lounges together in Faro. Interested?
I am sure our listeners, like myself, Nick, are repulsed by that mental image. That's Monocle's Nick Manise. Thanks for being with us on the programme here on Monocle Radio. This is The Briefing. To Japan now. A new book, Mansion Poem Tokyo Theory, is creating something of a buzz in the Japanese capital. The volume collects, analyses and reimagines the copy from more than 1,600 ads for new condominiums for sale in the metropolis. The author of the volume, photographer Ken Oyama, suggests that his text can help to decode the urban imagery of Tokyo and better understand this amazing city. How so? Well, Monocle's Ryuma Takahashi spoke with him to find out.
Diva, a goddess, swoops down upon the height of radiance.
Yes, this is undoubtedly a poem, but it's not a poem. This is an advertising copy for new condominium in Takasaki City, Japan. Such poetic copy can be seen everywhere in Japan, on train posters, station advertisement, and more. Oyama explains why such mansion poems are created.
I named this kind of copies mansion poems because it's completely different from the everyday language use. It's incredibly high-tension writing that can only be described as poetry. There are several reasons why it becomes poetry, but two major ones. First, the timing. When mansion advertisements are published, it's when the mansion hasn't been built yet, so they have to make something that doesn't exist at all and sound incredibly attractive, so it inevitably becomes poetry. The other reason is that Japan's real estate industry has self-regulations to stop exaggerated advertising, but they still want to somehow say how wonderful this place is, so it ends up being vague, poetic expressions. This time I collected over 1,600 mansion poems and subjected them to text mining analysis to rank what kinds of words are being used. The most frequently used word was town, followed by urban or city, and green in Japanese.
As seen in the fact that town was the most frequently used word, Mansion poems are characterized by saying nothing about the building itself. Instead, he says they tend to talk about the location where it will be built.
It's very strange that they say nothing about the building itself, which should be the product itself. And why is that? For example, my hometown is suburban, and there, let's say, a 70 square meter condo costs about $400,000. The same floor plan, same size, with the same facilities. If it's built in central Tokyo, it becomes over $1 million. So what is this $600,000 price difference? Condominiums are highly industrialized products, so the construction costs don't vary that much. In other words, if you focus on the condominium itself, which should be the product being sold, you can't explain the $600,000 price difference. What explains it is the mansion's location. Buying a condo doesn't mean you're buying the condo itself. You're buying where you live. The fact that everyone takes this for granted, that itself is very strange. And I really wanted to say that, which is why I wrote this book.
Transform the city's evolving functions, facilities, and content, all of it, into comfortable living devices.
This is the English translation of advertising copy for condominium built in central Tokyo. What we can understand from such poems is that when purchasing condominiums, the location and towns are converted into numerical specs and commodified, he says.
In mansion poems, there are many words like enjoy or receive, obtain, and conquer in Japanese, and this commodification appears in these words. Compared to previous eras when ordinary people couldn't choose where to live, these past 100 years are very special. You now consider your budget and choose where to live, but good locations are expensive, so with the amount you can afford, you give up on location or adjust various parameters. You completely objectify the neighborhood as options. What we can infer about our post-war housing perspective, neighborhood perspective, and cities from mansion poems is that, in essence, we think neighborhoods are products with fixed specs that we should choose and use without losing money. The national housing policy is designed to support this, and sellers are structured to commodify things this way. So it's the flip side of not believing at all in attachment to cities, or that neighborhoods are something you can get involved with or make better.
Enjoy the city. Embrace the greenery.
This is also the English translation of the copy for the condominium in Tokyo, and it contains the other keyword, green. Oyama says this shows that modern people's image of the ideal living environment has remained unchanged throughout history.
Mansion poems always say that there have to be both urban and natural environment, despite there being only a small amount of trees or a nearby river. What we can understand from this is that our image, or what an ideal living environment should be, has remained completely unchanged. And what is that? In essence, it's quiet suburban residential areas. In the 19th century, cities were smelly and unsanitary, and there weren't places where humans could live. This was a problem everywhere in the world. At that time, there was an ideal of living properly in green, lush places, a bit away from the city, and preferably working there too. Mansion Poems promotes this too, but in the end, everyone has to commute. So while green, lush suburban housing is the ideal, we still want to be as close to the city as possible. Despite this contradiction, they promote it like a fantasy, as if all of this is properly available here. This doesn't change, even when you go back through different eras, and it doesn't change by region either.
For Monocle in Tokyo, I'm Ryuma Takahashi.
Ryuma-san, thank you very much, as always, for your reporting. Fascinating stuff. That is all we have time for on today's edition of The Briefing. The show was expertly produced by Hassan Anderson, our researcher was Daniela Braw-Smith, and our studio manager was Steph Chengu. My thanks to them, one and all. We will be back on Monday at exactly the same time. If you want another deeper dive into the world's news, join Andrew Muller for the Daily a little later. But that's your lot from The Briefing. I'm Tom Edwards. Goodbye, and thanks for listening.